you want me to stand behind the desk or?
No, you can stand
Where? Come in, don't be shy. We have seats. Alright guys, I'll just get started because we have a panel after this.
We will break up 1-2 minutes.
Absolutely.
Then I will introduce the panel and then you can start.
Alright.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, appreciate it.
So hello everyone, welcome. We have the investment in the future of mobile gaming, leveraging AI for unprecedented growth with Maximilian Seeburg, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So I hope you enjoy the panel. At the end, you can ask any question you have. The talk is for 30 minutes, right?
It's 30 minutes. I'll try to go through it as quickly as possible so that we maybe can have a bit of a conversation. After this, we have a panel that is about gaming and game investments, which will have quite some similarities in terms of the topics, and then we will have a bit more time for questions. So we can also like bring that into the panel really afterwards. So yeah, but I will just give a quick introduction about that topic. Thanks so much, everyone. I mean, usually I would like to start with asking how many of you use AI to develop your games or do your games, but I don't know how much of statistical relevance this has now. But okay, it's a fair few. This is quite, not a deep tech level we are talking about. So I think, I hope there's a little bit for everyone in there, and I think it builds up into the, panel talk we'll have with the others afterwards. So I think that fits in quite nicely. My name is Max. I'm from the AI.FUND. We are kind of like a new kid on the block, if you'd like to think about it like this. We started this year with investments into early stage companies, predominantly in AI, as the name suggests. But AI obviously nowadays can be, in a lot of different ways shown, right? For us, because I come from the game investment background, so I was founder and managing director of One Up Capital before that. It is obviously like, gaming infrastructure, again, broad variety. We do seed and Series A, ticket size between 500 to 2 million euros now, or US dollars, depending on the case. And yes, across Europe, right? We don't do investments into Asia or US at this stage, for example. Right, but feel free to connect with me afterwards, and we can have a longer chat, the coming weeks. Now let's talk about funding within the gaming space, especially within gaming that is related into venture capital. Now this is obviously data from Convoy Ventures, fantastic VC fund in the gaming infrastructure space, especially, that found that last quarter 22% of all investments into gaming were related to artificial intelligence, right? So that means the data, just to understand what does it actually mean, the company description of the data source said this company does gaming in relation towards artificial intelligence, right? So it's quite broad, but just so that you understand the data set here. I think it's still amazing to see that last quarter we're at 22%, and it's consistently growing. So that means more and more publishers, infrastructure companies, studios, and so on are trying to implement it and execute AI as much as they possibly can, right? And this is kind of the scenario that we want to start out with. Now, to put it a bit more into context, and again, I'm trying to keep it a bit generalistic here today, and we can dive into more specific questions maybe into the panel. What are, in our opinion, the current 4 main pillars where you can apply, obviously we're talking about applied AI here, right? This is not like, your how to build an own LLM, don't do that, but how can we apply LLM in a good way? We do have the whole space of user experience in general, right, and how we can enhance that. That kind of relates quite a lot to NPCs in general, or basically the characters of the game that you're playing, interacting with. Same as goes with the game design. Now, game design is a quite broad term because this can be obviously really the actual level design and the mechanics behind it. but also the content generation, game balancing, and so on. For us, for example, very interesting to see is the companies that are trying to support you, and I guess most of you are. Can you just raise your hand who's a developer here and builds as a studio? Okay, a few, yeah, good. So for example, do you like QA testing? No, no. No one does, right? So like those kind of things is where we see AI doing tremendous effects in that space, right? Like sending out bots that basically go through your entire game and helping you to test everything. Doesn't matter if it's a treasury box you're trying to open or a door, or if it's actually like, you know, the level balancing and so on. So I think in that space there's so much happening which will make it just more effective. We're not talking having a big conversation about here makes it redundant, it makes it more effective to be a developer at those times. Now, once the game is released and built, we also look at analytics and what AI does for analytics. Incredible space, in my opinion, when you think about monetization and just like, you know, user behavior and so on, what you can read and learn from that, right? This is not too surprising yet, but this is like, you know, the 4 directions which are already applied and being used to a certain kind of, you know, stage. Not everyone raised their arms, not everyone is a developer here. Again, I said statistically not relevant, but we're trying to, like, you know, see a little bit like who of you use it, want to use it, is afraid of using it, or say like I'm using this every day. You know, we're not just talking basic GPTs here. We're talking like, you know, proper infrastructure topics that help you as a studio. Now, where do we see like current trends? A few things a bit intertwining in a sense. There's a little bit of a, you know, I don't like this when those presentations have those like out of the box formatting, but it's fine. Personalization. We mentioned that on the previous slide as being, you know, a very broad, interesting topic for AI. Now, creating those hyper-personalized, you know, experiences where the content is actually, you know, generating dynamically based on the environments and the changes that the user has, I think is something that we are like, you know, just on the curve of like understanding where we are standing right now, right? So this is like just the very beginning of how content is being generated. Now, when we think about content generation, we think about visuals, obviously, but one space that we look at quite a lot is audio recognition. Very interesting space, especially when you think about the whole part of you're not just playing with your hands, but you're just actually by talking to the game. Now, the game should also respond to that, and that's where we see voice synthesis coming in, right? Think about like the scalable options of taking God himself, Morgan Freeman's voice into your game, but for a fraction of the cost, because an AI will obviously like replicate everything that he says based on the dynamics of the user that you're speaking to. So voice synthesis, content generation, both visually and from a verbal perspective, very big spaces in our opinion. Going a little bit away from content and personalization and how the game can develop, and if I'm speaking too quickly or you guys have questions, you can just ask, it's a small round here, is what happens around it. And I think this is something we shouldn't avoid by mentioning. One is legislation, bureaucracy and everything around it. That can be very helpful, can be an advantage in some cases. You've seen the European AI Act maybe coming around now, so there's a lot happening in that space, same as in the US. For some it's a blessing because it opens up and it democratizes the whole process a little bit more, which can be something good, but as you know, with everything that is being democratized, there's obviously rules attached to it and other things that will maybe slow down the processes in the future. So obviously, it's not, a trend is always something positive, but this can go into both directions, obviously. One more part which is often, I wouldn't say forgotten, but not mentioned so much, because obviously personalization and content generation is so highly you know, mentioned in media and so on, is the community itself, right? I think like the way you can use AI as a servicing tool, basically to communicate with your audience and help them to basically engage on a deeper level, I think is untapped potential for a lot of companies still. The other point is, like, you know, when you think about toxic player behavior, when you think about cheating and basically like misbehavior in general, you know, in gaming, especially when it's like with live ops and so on, I think there's a lot that AI can help to reduce those issues nowadays. So have a look what AI can do to help you in those cases. And you know, when I talked about like investing into AI, we obviously invest into AI in games that are powered by AI, but this is you know, a double-sided sword in the sense that I also want you to think how you can invest your time and efforts into that space. Predictive analytics, I've mentioned that before. I think here is the same, it's a similar topic. We are at the beginning of understanding what AI can actually do with our analytics, right? Of course, it can, like, you know, help us to, you know, do rudimentally forecastings and so on. But we are now getting to the point where AI will create proper sentimental analysis for your users. And this will help you to understand the user in a different dimension than just looking at their LTV, for example. Because the LTV ultimately will tell you that they're engaged. So great, that's amazing. You show that to your investor. But what does it really tell you of what you did well or not so well? So you're breaking it down, creating sentiment around it is something that we see is coming, you know, more and more into consideration, should be coming into more consideration. Speaking of consideration, there's also obviously a few challenges which I think are important to highlight and mention at this point. Now, as we get into an area where more and more data is being personalized, and it has to become personalized to deliver on those personalized experiences, obviously data security needs to be rethought. Like, how are we actually, like, and we're getting back to like AI Act and Data Acts and GDPR and all those like things which we don't like to think about so much, but they will bite you in the butt when you don't like focus on that at some point, especially when you grow and you become a larger company. And there's very strict rules about this, especially in Germany, wherever country you guys are coming from. So keeping that in mind and not just like thinking, now I get all the data and I can do whatever with what I want with it is something to consider. I don't see this as like a threat or anything towards what AI can do. I just see this as something that we you know, should keep under like careful consideration. Autonomy, that's obviously something which I think is quite a fun part to always speak to developers about. Goes a little bit into the direction redundancy of creativity, redundancy of of developers in general. The level of code that AI can write is incredible by now, right? So this is fantastic stuff. Will it make a developer redundant? No, I don't think so. I think it will make the grunt work developers have to do redundant. Like, doing the same tree in different shapes again and again and again, this is something you don't have to do. This is nothing you should spend your time with. You should spend your time with actual creativity, right? And how that is powering your game. You have something AI doesn't have, and that's emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is what you should focus on to further enhance your game and how good the game eventually is going to become, right? The quality of that game. Quantitatively speaking, obviously, especially when you think about large world, open world games, this is where AI will absolutely, like, you know, hit it out of the ballpark. But in other ways, you know, it's the creative element that you know, we can have long conversations over beers about, because I think this is a fascinating topic where this is leading us towards to, right? Responsible gaming practices, we've mentioned that here because I think this is something you see across the board when you're speaking about AI. We're not talking Terminator stuff here, we're more talking about, like, you know, how much you basically want to give away from your own responsibility without losing too much touch to your own game, and then basically ending up in a scenario where the game is interacting with an audience that you maybe don't want to have, for example, right? So there's the, like, for example, let's say children, right? And it should be a friendly game, and all of a sudden you see someone beheading someone in the game. Shouldn't happen, right? Would be, wouldn't lead to good user reviews, I guess. Last but not least, very important, is the tech adoption. I think that's quite common in that space in general. Tech adoption rates have to adjust towards whatever output we're generating at the moment. It becomes so data heavy that we have to think about, okay, how is this scalable, and can we scale with the current data on a hardware basis, but also on a cloud basis that we can deliver right now. The, you know, increase in processing powers. I had a talk with a professor yesterday. She works like in climate tech in the city of Hamburg, who was telling me that they do analysis at what time certain servers are running based on the weather, right? And on what time, because like at some point we also have to think like time neutral, like Google is changing all their servers to become time neutral at the moment. So this is actually, like, you know, those are important points to keep in mind. They might not be too important for the game that you might develop right now, or for your publishing house that is, like, you know, doing their activities. But as a whole, you know, when we look at it from a macro perspective, this is becoming more and more important. Yeah, a little bit of a future outlook. A lot of what we are going to, what you see here, we touched base on now. I talked about content now for a few, like a few times, gave a few examples on that, but I am strongly believing that based on the quality of code that we're seeing already today, that is going to be absolutely tremendous in terms of what we're seeing in like the next 5 years, right? I mean, we are in this like, you know, when you look at it at a graph, we're at this inflection point of like, you know, really like further exponential growth, and this is quite interesting when you think about it. You know, when you zoom out, basically when you have a map and you look at, okay, wow, it's growing very fast, AI, but then in 5 years you zoom out and you see like, you know, the actual growth. So we're not there yet. So there's so much more to come, which maybe is hard to grab visually at this point, but I think it will help everyone here in this room that is developing a game at the moment to make your work more effective and focus more on you know, not just the creative part, but also on how to make a good game, right? And when I say good game, I actually mean, and I have that on my last slide, I just remember now, a smart game, but we'll get to that in a second and what I mean by that. Now, growth, we just like, you know, talked about growth in different matters, but I think AI will, and this is also a very interesting space for us that we are watching, not just help you to grow your users based on the analytics that it basically reads and helps you to optimize, but it will also come up with new ways and adjusted ways of how to monetize users. And this is something where I feel there is a balancing act that is going to be quite important, in the sense that AI might help you to automate your users to, like, you know, be milked as much as possible to make you the most money as possible, which from an investment perspective you obviously love to see. But at the end of the way, you need to balance, obviously, that this is not just like something that sucks, like, you know, the living soul out of every player, financially speaking now, but also is just an enjoyable game, right? So there's a balancing act of auto-optimization that might, like, you know, ruin the, you know, thought behind the game after all. So I guess, you know, balancing that is going to be quite interesting. But those new revenue streams, and I don't know what it is right now, right? This used to be a pure hyper-casual conference, which is now going into a different direction, yeah? And we have changes in monetization that is happening frequently. So what's going to happen in 5 years, I think, is going to be, you know, very heavily driven based on AI, what the AI learns about our users, the dynamic they have with paying basically at the moment, and that can be, you know, in really different means. I mean, think about, like, you know, actual, like, you know, cash transactions growing quite heavily at the moment and so on, rather than, you know, the old hyper-casual, more the old, don't forgive me for saying that, more hybrid casual scenarios that we have right now. Mechanics, nothing new based on what we've said on the previous slides. We will see that the game mechanics, as we strongly believe in them and how we are using them and how we're playing them, are changing now. It's obviously like looking into like a glass ball of saying, are we going to steer a game with our hands in the future? Are we doing that with our thoughts? Are we going to do that with our voice? Or are we, some people can like work on their ears, maybe they do it like that, I don't know. But obviously, you know, that is going to have a tremendous impact in all those directions, because adaptation and individualization is going to be more and more key to go towards this, like, you know, the needs of the individual. You want to please the certain players individually, and you can't possibly do that without AI. That is, you would be killing yourself, and you shouldn't go around and try to please every one of your users. Yeah, that's not possible. That's never going to be possible without AI, because with AI we can at least, in a certain spectrum, say, okay, we try to bring them all on the same level, figuratively speaking now, and then we give them basically different variables that they can interact with visually, from a sound perspective, from the difficulty, I mean, you know, as they need. And I think this is an important point that gaming always try to do when you think about levels of difficulties in, like, especially premium titles, right? Like, some people play Doom on a nightmare mode. I tried it, I'm not so good at that, but some people play it on an easy mode, right? Don't kill me mode, I think it's called. So, you know, we've always tried to do this throughout the decades. Yeah, so the future of mobile gaming is not just about making good games. So, like, I would like to differentiate here. You still have to make really good games, but it's about making those games smart, right? And you leverage AI to basically help you to make those games smart. And I think then you can success very easily here. And we were going to talk about what do venture capitalists are looking for when making an investment in gaming in the panel later on. And AI obviously has a big role. You don't have to become an AI company. Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't invest, for example, into an e-commerce company that has an AI bot that they get from a third party just on their page. But thinking about how you can use the existing tools out there to enhance whatever work you're doing at the moment and make yourself more efficient will definitely help with fundraising. Because when they see that you apply what is currently in demand from a strategic and from an efficiency perspective, then I think you're on the right track. Thinking then about how can I maybe take those existing LLMs and so on to build a framework for my own game development, to create multiple games from that framework, will make you a little mini powerhouse, in my opinion, which I think, from an investing perspective, I don't want to take too much away from the later conversation, it's going to be a very interesting conversation you guys are going to have. That's it. I try to do this as much as quick as possible, because we have 5 minutes left, but so we can do some questions. Guys, thanks so much for listening, and feel free, because I'm going to leave after the panel directly, you know, add me on LinkedIn, let's stay in touch, send us a deck, you know, we're here to help. I'm in the gaming industry for 10 years now, and I love to interact with, we also do invest in other spaces, but yeah, feel free to reach out and interact. Yeah, thanks guys. Do you have questions? Anyone? Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask about the part where you talked about mechanics, optimizing monetization, other stuff. But I saw personally from mobile games, right, and I'm a game designer, that you have the basic framework of your game, which usually already accounts for 80% of its kind of success and its performance. And the rest you do is 20%, so you're tweaking your level funnel, your monetization, and so on. So speaking about AI and the impact of AI on games, aren't we a bit like overvaluated it? Like
yeah, it's a good point, but then think about the cost of that application, right? Like, I mean, when you think about using it for optimizing 20%, how much that can increase the total LTV, for example, for the cost that you had, like, you know, to purchase the tool or whatever you're using, or to build it, then in most cases it's ROI positive. So in that sense, yeah, we're trying to, there might be cases where it's being overused, right? But those 20% shouldn't be like underestimated on the impact they can have later on in the long-term value that you're generating from that. So I think that is absolutely fine to push it in that direction.
Like in what do you think will be the areas that the AI will be most used while developing a game, or maybe promoting a game, or maybe even creating the visuals of the game or whatever?
All of them, but especially, like, I mean, we have to differentiate. I think, for example, when you think about analytics, I think it will take over most of the work, because I don't think it's necessary to have human computing power, and you had to like deal with that. So I think analytics and monetization in a certain way, I think, can be completely fully optimized in that sense, or will be in the future. Yeah, sorry, I have to correct what I'm saying here. But when we go back to the game design again and the game mechanics itself, I think, and as I said earlier, this needs a huge level, and this is my personal opinion now, of emotional intelligence, of your own creativity, which is the basic foundation of every game there is in most cases. I mean, there's shit out there that is obviously completely AI generated and some good stuff, but good games are generated by, this is my own opinion, by your personal impact you have on that game. Now, what does AI do is it takes that and helps you to personalize that to a lot of different variables and individuals, which you can't simply do with your own developing power. And that's what it should do, right? So given, for example, the size of certain games, right? The way the game feels, right? The way the game feels itself, you know, like the atmosphere you create. I think that's you as a developer. But the space, right, and the dimensions of how large it is, how many trees are shown and so on, that's AI. And that should be AI in the future. The grunt work. Let AI do the grunt work.
Oh.
Have fun. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, hey, Ben from Megaplay, we're back in technology company.
Hi.
And also to expand on that, so we work with a bunch of customers who are fairly high-end on AI stuff, and actually one thing that they scale a lot nowadays is studio internal operations. So customer support is one thing that vastly benefits, right, from AI summarization, translation, And you directly mentioned it was maybe close to the community aspect.
Yeah,
But I
that's-
see mass adoption this year of people moving to scale their customer support with AI-related tools. And the game design is lagging behind because none of our customers have yet figured out how to vectorize their game design into something that could be generated. So there's no example data, you can't extrapolate from junk.
This is a very good
Yes.
point. That's a very good point. Thank you for saying that, because obviously the level of integration that you would need to do, I would say, like basic translation work or community work, and so on, or analytics, especially with AI. The entrance border is much lower than, as you say, level design and actual like vector analysis, because that requires you to, like, you know, set up your Unity or your engine or whatever you're building in to really be integrated with that. And we are at the point where this becomes easier and easier, like Layer AI, for example, a very interesting company in that space. Like, it helps to make this process easier, but you know, we're not there quite yet. But we're at the beginning of all of this, so I mean, we're not at the end of it where we think, ah, this is Web3 trend. I'm just kidding. I'm a big fan of Web3, so it's yeah. Any other questions, guys?
I
Otherwise
think maybe
we-
we're confusing a bit the notions of AI and machine learning.
Absolutely, good point. I love that. Yeah, a lot of this is, and this is us as a VC especially, we deal with decks every day that say we do AI, but it's still machine learning. It's not yet AI, it's still at the machine learning part. But at least it's trying to develop into that direction. And I mean, when I see something that is machine learning, well, you've just put a wrong notion to it, but you're at least trying to think in the right direction. Yeah. Guys, thank you so much. Maybe stay for the panel. We have Martin from Poland VC here as well, and Uluc is here, a fantastic game studio from Turkey. And we're talking a little bit about, like, you know, what's changing at the moment when it comes to fundraising, what to look out for, maybe find a few tips and tricks in that direction. Yeah, so grab a water or coffee and stay tuned. Thanks, guys. I will just actually also grab a
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yes, please.
You should.
Yeah.